First of all, I just want to express how honored I am to be in the room with all of you. These are the leaders of this movement for, actually, in many ways, for all time. Because this is a historic moment. And as I look across this room, I see leaders who lead millions of people, but didn't just start leading millions of people last week. You've invested your entire life in this cause, and somehow it all culminates in this moment. Because, ladies and gentlemen, look around this room. You are in attendance at the first Judeo-Christian Zionist Congress. And you should let that word first sink in. In 1897, Theodor Herzl, when he gathered 200 delegates in a concert hall in Basel for the first Zionist World Congress, he rose to speak, and the ovation lasted 15 minutes before he could say a word. And when he finally spoke, he said, "We want to lay the cornerstone for the house which will become a refuge for the Jewish nation." That evening, as he sat quietly in his own room, he wrote in his diary that he had founded the Jewish state, and people laughed at him. They laughed that such a war of ideas could be won. He said, "Give it 50 years. Everyone will see it." And he was right almost to the year. As we've already heard here today, most people think that only Jews attended that Congress. And they're mainly right, but they're not entirely right, because Theodor Herzl was such a visionary. He saw the role of Christian friends generations later, and he had among his personal guests 10 of them, including, remarkably, the founder of the Red Cross, the first Nobel laureate. By the way, the successor of the founder of the Red Cross, the president of the International Committee for the Red Cross, today, while we're gathered here, was meeting with the foreign minister of Iran in Geneva. Among his friends was the British diplomat, William Heckler. He, in fact, became one of Herzl's closest allies. Herzl was a secularist. Heckler was a man of faith. They needed each other. Herzl himself wrote that Heckler declares my movement to be a biblical one, even though I proceed rationally at all points. And Heckler regarded Herzl as an instrument in the hands of the divine providence, a man fulfilling God's plan, whether he knew he was doing it or not. The secular visionary and the believing Christian, the political and the theological, working together hand in hand. And that partnership, ladies and gentlemen, has never ended. And today we gather here in Nashville as its heirs, except there are now 700 million of us around the world. We form constituencies that no leader with any political ambition whatsoever can afford to ignore. But our deepest obligation is not political, it is generational. And that call is for us now to preserve our values and to pass them on. It was actually Herzl himself who coined the term Christian Zionist. A Zionist being someone who simply believes that the Jews have the right to live in their historic land. This is why anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, because it presupposes that Jews alone among all the peoples of the earth have no right to live in their land. The very name of today's Congress traces back to Herzl. Now, you don't have to be an evangelical to be in this room. You don't have to agree on every point of theology that I may profess or every line of policy that everyone here may profess to believe. You just have to believe that history's oldest hatred is still worth fighting and that our shared civilization is worth defending. And why do I belong to this fight? It's really simple. Gratitude. I'm a Christian. There is no Christianity without Israel. Jesus was Jewish. Almost all the Bible was written by Jews. When I opened my Bible yesterday morning before I baptized our 13-year-old son, I was opening a Jewish book. What we call the Old Testament is actually the Hebrew Bible, every concept of God and human dignity and free will, the Ten Commandments, these are Jewish ideas that shaped my Christian faith and shaped our entire Western world. When my Jewish friends ask me, sometimes peculiarly, why evangelicals stand with the Jewish community, I always say the same thing. Your book is our book. Your heroes are our heroes, and your values are our values. They are the foundation of every good thing in our Christian lives, including this very country, because the history of America is not just a Christian story. It is a Judeo-Christian story. And a civilization that will not defend the Jewish people will die. You cannot be pro-American and anti-Israel, period. The two cannot coexist. We have stood with Israel over the last several years on 7 fronts as they fought terror in Gaza, in Lebanon, in the West Bank, in Syria, in Yemen, in Iraq, and in Iran. But it may be the 8th front that determines everything. This is the war that still exists, and it's far from over. It is not just an information war. It is a cognitive war. It's a war for truth in an age of lies that aims to hack the very minds of our children. It is the war for the hearts and minds of the next generation. This 8th front is not just Israel's war. It's not just a war for the Jewish community. It is our fight. Over the past 2 years, we have witnessed the First World Information War, a campaign that was fixed on Israel and our Jewish neighbors, but it was aimed at destroying them as a precursor on the way to dismantling the entire West itself. The same forces that delegitimize the Jewish state aim to dismantle the foundations of our civilization. This cognitive war, it is not organic. It is funded. It is organized. It has captured already most of our universities, and now it's coming for our schools. And just last week, congressional hearings exposed that some of the most insidious and prominent anti-Israel organizations and messaging in America were actually funded by adversaries of the United States of America. Foreign governments pouring money into groups to radicalize our children. Enough is enough. I'll give you just one example, and there are thousands of them. On December 3rd in Los Angeles, a group of masked protesters showed up at the Wilshire Boulevard Temple. Inside, the temple is in Koreatown. Inside, Jews and Koreans were just fellowshipping, just a gathering of neighbors together, spending time together. The agitators slipped in. They shattered glass. They screamed hate. They threatened people. Not in Tehran. This was in Los Angeles on a weekday. Days later, the FBI arrested members of that very same group. You know what they were doing? They were building pipe bombs in the Mojave Desert. Their plan was to detonate explosives across Southern California on New Year's Eve. The same hatred that stormed a synagogue in early December was building pipe bombs by Christmas, destined for the iconic American New Year's Eve celebration in Los Angeles. These are all the same threat, because what begins with the Jews never ends with the Jews. This threat doesn't just come from the left either. Anti-Semitism is making a comeback on the right, and now it is knocking on the door of the church, and it will not be allowed in. These podcasters and bloggers, they're smuggling old hatred through new platforms. And one of the reasons we're gathered here today is to address it. When anti-Semitism hides behind a cross or flows from the mouth of a so-called Christian or so-called Catholic influencer, it is not just another viewpoint. It is a betrayal of the gospel itself. It is evil, plain and simple. If your worldview requires a Jewish villain to make sense of your frustration, you are sick. So what do? We fight and we win on the 8th front. Every person in this room has a sphere of influence, a pulpit, a classroom, a camera, a microphone, a locker room, and a dinner table. Use it. This is your line to hold, and this is your line to advance. Because the lies are aimed like arrows at the hearts of your loved ones. They're funded by the billionaire patrons of the Muslim Brotherhood. They are laundered through shell companies hiding behind their communist paymasters. And every bit of it must be confronted, and every bit of it must be defeated in our legislatures, in our classrooms, in our churches, and in our culture. Because anti-Semitism doesn't just expand because of the boldness of those who hate Jews. It expands because of the quiet and the retreat of good people. As I've often said, I believe every generation is given a test. There was a generation, the test was the trains heading to Auschwitz. And there was a generation that had to decide whether they would speak for Soviet Jews all the way on the other side of the world. And there's now our generation, the post-October 7 generation, watching anti-Semitism surge back across borders and ideologies and screens, and sometimes from what we thought was the home team. But this test is bigger than anti-Semitism alone. It is a test of whether Western civilization itself will survive, whether the values that built the freest, most prosperous societies in human history will be handed to our children. And history is asking, where are the Christians? Where are the watchmen guarding our Judeo-Christian walls? What will our answer be? What will your answer be? It should be that we were among the brave, the bearers of truth, those who preserved in our time the Western world that was forged by our forefathers. We were the friends of the Jews when the world relapsed to its oldest hatred. And this time, in our generation, the hatred will not prevail because we are here to win.